Hey there, welcome to episode 13 of the Quaggling Sand audio program. My name is Dan Hugo, your host. Just me, nobody else, as usual. Today, I was actually going to do an episode about lateral thinking, and I was putting together a couple of stories from mostly engineering, like product, style, adventures, but it turns out I couldn't really come up with a really good way of describing lateral thinking. You may insert your own humorous, ironic reference if you like. So today instead, and normally I would record this on Tuesday evening to publish on Wednesday morning sometime. That did not happen. It is presently 1:30 p.m. on Wednesday. So I will do this one a little bit late, but a much easier topic. And apropos, since I keep plugging the buymeacoffee.com website for me, not them. So today, making coffee. So coffee is a real thing. It's become, actually, from what I've been reading, it's becoming less of a thing, which is probably good given climate change and the impact of different climates and their changes on bean growing. I'm drinking a coffee right now. I just made it. I'll get into what I make every morning in a moment. I normally drink it before I record an episode, but today it seemed appropriate. But yeah, coffee's a thing. It's the most popular drug anywhere. Fortunes are made, work is accomplished. It's generally been good. In fact, you, and I will leave this for you to find, you may find stories about the role coffee played especially in the economic revolution, manufacturing, work days, through history, especially in America. The inclusion of coffee and coffee breaks turns out to be instrumental in productivity. Something to think about. When you're locked down, though, there are a few better hobbies to develop, and so that's where I sort of came into my own. And I'm sure this will insult many baristas out there, and certainly most Italians, but you too can be your own home barista with just a little bit of practice. So first things, as usual, if you are new to this program, quaggling sand is a thing, is a word, a term I coined when I was like 4 or 5 years old. It is the sense that you, the sensation, I suppose, in your limbs most often when you were, maybe you were sitting on a foot or an arm or something, and as the circulation returns, some people call it pins and needles. I call it quaggling sand. There you go. So the links, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo, ko-fi coffee.com, ko-fi.com/DanHugo. These are where, well, more buymeacoffee.com. I have a list of the various episodes, the various shows, channels, hosted on Spotify at present. I got a deal very similar to Joe Rogan, about 250 million short, but you can find my audio programs and some other stuff listed there. So the Buy Me a Coffee profile page is where I try to keep my projects detailed briefly, kind of a out of band, almost like a link tree style thing. But here I can be more verbose, which I am wont to do. So yeah, check it out, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. You do not need to buy me a coffee. But if you do, actual coffee will be purchased, and I will get into that. A few links to some YouTube channels. During the pandemic lockdown, as I was learning the ways of coffee, I determined the most helpful YouTubers in the coffee space, and there are many. This is by no means a comprehensive list, but for myself, I think everybody knows James Hoffman. Red frame glasses, hair product, hair. In England, very talented, very interesting presentations. A good starting point if you are curious about how to make a French press or how to grind beans, or whether you should drink that 100-year-old coffee you've had sitting on a shelf somewhere. A lot of good programs. He used to own a coffee shop, or no, he still does maybe, but he is a barista champion from some years ago. Good starting point, definitely. Lance Hedrick, definitely drinks a lot of coffee. That definitely comes through in his presentation. James is a little bit more relaxed. Lance is a little bit more energized. Lance gets into some really detailed looks at like different burr materials for burr grinders, different sizes and orientations and all that stuff, different grind speeds, different beans and how the grinders work with them, different styles of preparation, et cetera, et cetera. So he gets a little bit more detailed. James gets detailed. Lance kind of dives in a little bit more. And he just recently added another channel, which is linked from his main, which I have linked here. Lance Hedrick Unfiltered, where I think he does more deep dives on particular grinders or espresso machines or whatever. So very interesting character. Definitely drinks the product. And Morgan Eckroth, Morgan Drinks Coffee. She recently had another successful barista challenge, barista competition outcome. She's an interesting character. She was, she does something similar to the other two. She's much more into preparations though, like different styles and methods and so on. So 3 good resources. These are the people I leaned on to learn more about my coffee adventure. I will say now, although I'll get to this, that I was a Starbucks and a Keurig and a Nespresso person, but all that has changed. And I've linked to my On the Baratza site. This is not an affiliate link. It's just a link to the classic Baratza Encore. Baratza was recently acquired by, I can't remember. They make espresso machines. It'll come to me. Either way, Baratza Encore, still a fine machine. I have not tried the ESP, but guess what? You can ask any of my YouTubers there. They've certainly James and Lance have tried it. I don't know if Morgan has. Anyway, you can find a wealth of brilliant and useful information about coffee preparations and beans and styles and equipment and devices and science, all that and more online. So my coffee journey began when I was in I guess in high school. I never really drank coffee ever. So in college, I would occasionally, I didn't really like coffee. I didn't enjoy the taste. When I was in high school, I worked at McDonald's, which I've mentioned in a previous episode in more detail. The coffee preparation there was simple. You would drop a filter into a commercial drip coffee machine, drop in a pre-measured bag of coffee, turn it on, and coffee would come out. And that's how that worked. I never really tasted it. I didn't know how good or bad it was. I'm going to guess it was bad. When people who are preparing your coffee don't care about coffee, as that dog probably does care, you don't know what you're going to get. So it really helps to have a coffee fan of some sort preparing the coffee. So yeah, I used to, I didn't drink coffee in college either. I now and then would have some chocolate covered espresso beans, or we would go to a Thai restaurant called Sanam Luang, which is probably another episode in the future. We'd go to Sanam Luang in Pomona. They would give us, thanks to a story I will tell another time, they would give us tons of free Thai iced teas. Thai iced tea is still caffeinated, loads of sugar, but I was not really into Thai iced coffee. So yeah, I was really a tea person. There was a coffee cart on campus near the classroom end of the campus at Harvey Mudd. So every day I would get free cups of tea, no coffee, just tea. So for some reason I was a tea nut. I didn't really particularly love tea. I was not like into the different tea leaves and styles and stuff, but it was sufficient for my needs. So there you go. It was when I was in Silicon Valley in 95, was it? 95, 96? No, yeah, 96, something like that, is when I started dating someone who really liked coffee, like a lot. So then I started drinking coffee. So there you go. I had to push through the bitter taste of bad coffee, but I made it. So bad coffee, speaking of, is it's everywhere. Bad coffee can be found at every turn. Often if there's an automated machine somewhere that makes bulk coffee, like fills up a pot for the office or for the team or whatever. If the person making that coffee doesn't care, if you're using pre-measured, it could go either way. I mentioned the McDonald's coffee. It was not good, I think. It never really smelled great. It always had a burnt smell to it. Nowadays, of course, you would know the temperature and the grind and the flow rate and all that. You would take all that into account and say, oh, if it tastes like this, you should do that. You should let the water come off the boil a bit, or make the grind a little bit finer or coarser to make it more or less bitter, less or more astringent, different amounts of water, all that stuff. So there are any number of variables. There are several. But if you are not aware of these and you just figure, oh, it's a cup of coffee, and maybe if it's free at the office, I don't really care, cream and sugar, let's go. And then before you know it, you're dumping in like 4 sugars and 4 creams just to get around the taste, which is, if you're in a bad place, could be awful. There's a reason I don't drink coffee during recording. Yeah, I had to pause there for a second. So several employers I've had over the years had some sort of coffee machine. Some of the machines were better than others. Some of the people using them were better than others. We could usually make our own in one way or another. So when I was at Netscape, we had small commercial espresso machines in each of the kitchenettes, and there were many. Like each floor, we were in the Middlefield buildings, and I think each floor probably had, I don't know, like 10 kitchenette areas with the glass front refrigerators with all kinds of free beverages, and then at least 1 or sometimes 2 individual commercial espresso machines. So if you didn't know what you were doing, like me, you would make an espresso to stay awake. I stayed at work one time for 4 days or something like that. So utility of coffee was at hand, but I definitely had no idea what I was doing. Case in point, I sometimes would put espresso coffee into the portafilter. Then I would put a packet of hot cocoa mix, into the portafilter and let the water flow through both. Yeah, you can do this with Cuban coffee and brown sugar, but this was not good. But yeah, I would make concoctions every once in a while. It wasn't great, but I would get some caffeine out of it. But I was really just tolerating poorly prepared coffee by me. When I worked at Phillips, we had a classic 2-burner drip coffee pot scenario. Not unlike McDonald's, really, but not quite as commercial. So the machines were meant for a person to just make a pot of coffee for whoever wanted some. We drank coffee now and then. It was much more interesting to leave the building and go get a coffee if we wanted to. So that was more common. When I worked at Palm, we had a full-size double, I don't know what you call. It was one machine with two places for portafilters. What do you call that, where you put the portafilter? Anyway, so we had a large espresso machine, and it was definitely commercial grade, and it was good. I learned more about how to make coffee, but I really didn't know what I was doing. So I didn't know what to taste, how to dial anything in, how to know if the grind was right, channeling, all these things. No idea. When I worked at Jawbone, and these are just examples. I've worked at many places. Jawbone got a commercial Nespresso machine. So the Nespresso pods were more like little silver foil flying saucers, like little discs more than cups. But and those were good. They were not great. They were good. Some people love Nespresso. And in fact, I would later get a Nespresso machine after my Keurig started really losing favor with me. So I had the Nespresso, and it was okay, but not quite. When I worked at Salon, which was when I returned my re-entry into Silicon Valley, I started working at Salon.com in the Rincon Center in San Francisco. So I would jump on the train at like 6 o'clock in the morning, something like that. I would catch the train. I would go all the way up to San Francisco from Sunnyvale. So like 50 minutes on the express, 55 maybe. I would get off. I would walk around. Nothing was open yet, usually. Maybe a Starbucks or a Pete's would be open somewhere. But the path I would usually walk, there was nothing really open. I would walk along the bay, under the bridge, to the Rincon Center at Mission, if you're familiar with the area. So the train station came from King Street, is it? All the way to Rincon Center. I would get in. I'd be the first one in. So I would start making the coffee. So they had a little bit more higher end commercial coffee machine. So it had a like a shower head injector in the coffee basket. So you'd put the coffee in, you would load it up and turn it on, and it would do its thing. And the coffee always tasted very bitter. It had a burnt flavor to it. I always wondered if the water was just too hot, like hitting it with steam and cooking the beans, bringing out a burnt flavor maybe. Not for me. I got to say, I'm not a drip coffee fan in general. So it was a drip style. It would fill an urn of coffee, and then you're good for several hours. Everybody on the floor we had one floor of one side of part of the building. Everybody was very happy to have coffee in the morning. They didn't really care much about how delightful it was, just that it was there. There was somebody in accounting whose name escapes me. He used to get in first, and then he started noticing that he said, "Oh, you get in before me." He's like, "Do you want to know how to make the coffee?" And I said, "Yeah." So the baton was passed for a time. I was making the coffee. Never really great. So I used to hang out at Pete's more. If I was in the city, there was a Pete's near me in Sunnyvale, so that Pete's was good. Pete's, by the way, if you can find one, I think there's one near UNLV in Vegas, maybe. Pete's has French press. It's a pretty good deal. Tastes pretty good. So if you get a French press, you get to make it yourself at your table. And that became one of my favorites at Pete's. Starbucks, I don't get the sense that I would enjoy that as much. But yeah, so plenty of coffee shops. Now, once I became a fan of coffee shops and a fan of the laptop coffee shop co-work scheme, it was fun to visit different coffee shops in different places. I became very friendly. I guess you could say friendly. Yeah. Became very friendly with different baristas and different coffee shops. So I wasn't really a regular at Starbucks. I was more a regular at independent coffee shops. And as we all know, those are the better places to hang out. So that was part of the journey was visiting and hanging out in coffee shops. But the big delta, still at Salon, I read an article at some point somewhere about how the inventor of the Flowbee haircut, the Aerobee flying disc, very popular if you are into frisbee golf, or ultimate frisbee, more so ultimate frisbee, I think. The inventor of that came up with a coffee making device, and I was like, oh, that's weird. And it was like $35, and I had no idea what the value of such a thing would be, so I was like, that's kind of a lot to spend on a thing. I can just drink coffee for free at work or get a coffee at a Pete's. So I really had no idea. So one day, my colleague, you may know Farhad Manju, he was working at Salon at the time before he hit the big leagues and worked at the New York Times, which I think he still does. But he was walking into work one day, and I said something about an AeroPress. Maybe he made a comment about the coffee or something, and I said, I really want to try this. He goes, wait, what is it? So he contacted them and said, I'll write a review if you send me one. So they did. So we all tried it. I was like, wow, this is way better than this coffee we have here. So there you go. I was introduced to the AeroPress on a lark by chance. And so trying before buying, it worked out great. So I eventually purchased my own. When I was working on food trucks, which is another episode entirely, I would bring the AeroPress and filters. This is back when I was using paper filters. So I'd bring the paper filters and the AeroPress itself and some coffee, and then working on a truck. If I was in the morning helping to prep, the chef would put a pot of hot water on the grill. We'd make a couple of coffees. So it worked out nice. It was better than, only coffee trucks have coffee equipment on them. Food trucks tend to not have a coffee machine. So being able to carry an AeroPress in your bag worked out great. So really good find. I, to this day, owe a debt of gratitude, very small debt, to Farhad. I'll always remember him. halfway through the coffee. So I had an awful Keurig machine, which I brought with me which I had in Sunnyvale. Oh yeah, I did bring it with me to Vegas. So a Keurig, I can't remember who made it. Nothing special. I mean, at the time, getting the 2 pods with the milk, milk disc and the coffee disc and all. Oh, neato. You're like, man, if I knew then what I know now. But I had an awful Keurig machine. Then I got an espresso, Pixie, I think, like the cheapest one I could get. And I got some steel pods for the Nespresso so I could make my own, a little bit more environmentally friendly. Never quite as convenient as I would have hoped. The sticker thing they had to put on top of the little pod made it very frustrating to use. It was okay. Eventually we would have by the way, I was in Dublin and they had an espresso shop, so you could try all kinds of different pods. So I sat at the bar and I had all the coffee pods. So that's what kind of sold me on the Nespresso. So I was like, okay, I'll get the smallest machine. It's just me. Worked out fine. If you're going to go nuts with an espresso, you can spend a lot of money, I suppose. But if you're going to do that, don't do that. Do the go full manual. Learn how to make coffee. So eventually, though, I would take the plunge and I would get my Baratza Encore and start learning how to make coffee. During the pandemic, when we were all locked down, we were all staying home. I was like, I can order coffee beans. Our essential workforce will deliver them to me, and I can learn how to make coffee myself. So I got the grinder, started learning how to dial in, watched all these videos and read a bunch of articles, started learning about caffeine and extraction and temperatures. And, if you're an engineer, and I spent a lot of time and money to become one, not a PE, just a degree in engineering from Harvey Mudd College, a fine academic institution in Southern California. You learn about time, temperature transition, material properties, chemical reactions, batch versus stream processing. So batch processing is immersion brewing. Stream processing is percolation. Reaction inflows and outflows, reactants and products, all these things. Chemical engineering, thermodynamics. Heat exchange, all these things kind of, okay, I remember this. I remember that. So I started acquiring better tools. So I got the grinder, as I mentioned, got the AeroPress. That was good. Eventually got a mocha pot to try. And so I have 2 different sizes of mocha pot, like a 6 cup and a 3 cup. I think I have a 1 cup somewhere, but that's almost not worth using. I have 2 different French presses, a large and a small. I just used it to make tea yesterday, in fact, French press, the small one. I have 2 pour overs, 1 large, 1 small. And I know people will complain if there's still an Emax versus VI battle going on. There's a similar battle, whether to use actual paper filters or environmentally friendly non-paper filters. So I have a steel grate filter, like super fine. For the AeroPress, I have metal filters, screens, reusable. For the pour overs, I eventually got a Vietnamese Phin, Phin, so I can make my own real Vietnamese coffee pour over. No, not pour over. Iced coffee, but you pour the coffee runs into the glass, right? If you've seen that in a Vietnamese restaurant, I got it. So you can make Vietnamese coffee falling directly into ice with some sweetened condensed milk. Bam, Vietnamese iced coffee. So none of these require paper filters, so there's no consumables from that perspective. I enjoy the taste just fine. Some people will argue about acids and fines and things, but I got a Turkish Chevre, however you say that, Cezve. I have 2, actually, 1 small and 1 slightly larger. Both are big enough to make 1 demi-tasse full of Turkish coffee, which is basically the way you do it. I do not have the hot sand preparation set up, so I go with a small burner, a small actual burner, not inductive, Inductive might work better. I'm not sure if one of the two devices I have would work with an inductive surface. But I make the Turkish coffee. I did have a Turkish person around me for a while in Silicon Valley. She was not the person who liked the coffee. That was somebody else many years prior. But so I did learn how to make Turkish coffee from a Turkish person. I don't think I'm great at it, but it's fun. It makes a difference if you add the cardamom and other spices. So now and then. And then eventually I got a Flair Pro 2, which is a manual espresso press, which is delightful. It is not a standard size portafilter. The newer Flair, is it Flair 58 or Flair Pro 58 or something, has a preheater and a 58 millimeter, I think that's right, portafilter and all that. But this works fine if you're making a nice shot of espresso, or you can make a double. But it works great. No need for a massive machine that costs hundreds or thousands of dollars sitting on your countertop. It's just a little lever press with a little very nicely machined brew head. You put the coffee in the bottom, you put the top part on. If you would like to preheat it, arguably makes a difference for extraction. So you preheat that with some hot water, fill it up with some water, put the pressure gauge on, put it in the assembly, start pressing, try to get around 9 bars, bam, you're done. Great stuff. And I will say, it is quite good. Anyone who tells you, coffee shop coffee is always better. Well, because they do it all the time. So if you practice, you will find that you can make a coffee exactly as you like it. And I always say to my mom, for example, you can make a good coffee. You may be missing out. You may be spending money on coffee beans and then missing out on the flavor that you could extract by not knowing that you can make these adjustments. And so there you go. I prefer darker, more chocolatey coffee beans. So more of a darker roast. Espresso roast is fine. I've really come to enjoy Death Wish coffee, which sounds dramatic. Super caffeinated coffee. Meh. They blend Robusta and Arabica beans. Robusta beans have about twice as much caffeine per bean, but by I believe it's by mass. An Arabica. I don't know why I want to say Arabica. Arabica beans have something like 1% by mass. I think it's a little over 1% maybe. And then Robusta has something like 2.3%, something like that. So we're not talking, sounds better to say twice as much. Robusta beans tend to be a little bit more bitter. The Italian coffee tends to be more Robusta, the invention of the mocha pot, which, by the way, is probably the most difficult to really get good at. The mocha pot requires a certain amount of attention. You kind of have to wing it a little bit. You can throw an AeroPress filter in there. Sometimes could help, but you really got to time it right about putting the heat on and off, and you got to move the pot around. And I found the initial shot, like the first bits of coffee that come out, the first couple of pops of coffee through the little coffee tower, tastes better. So if you pour out the first shot or double maybe, that will be really nice. And then the remaining coffee will be a little bit more, and this is where technique will really come into play, but it will be a little less rich, a little less flavorful, maybe a little bit more bitter because it's been heated the whole time now. So the mocha pot really does take more practice. It's like making an omelet and flipping the egg, right? You really got to pay attention throughout the process. You can throw eggs in a poacher and let them poach on the stovetop, then come back after 2 minutes or something and they're poached. Not true. You don't want to singe your eggs nor your coffee. So yeah, the mocha pot, probably Turkish would be very close because you do have to pay attention so it doesn't boil over. But so these are two techniques that are worth becoming good at. French press, super easy. You put the coffee in, let it sit for like 5 minutes, stir, 5 minutes, pour. James Hoffman has a very nice video on French press technique that will get a nice outcome for your drinking pleasure. But the AeroPress really is my daily go-to, my daily driver, my daily grind. Haha. But I do like lighter roasts sometimes, and I do hand grind those. So I'll do a hand grind of a single origin. I have an Atlas coffee subscription, but I put it off all the time. So I probably get one every 2 months. It's supposed to be every 4 weeks, but I think it ends up being like every 8 or 10 weeks, just because I have a lot of coffee that can get at a better price. I really like Lavazza. There's 2 or 3 different. You can get a kilogram of Lavazza coffee for the same price as a 12-ounce bag of Atlas single origin. The Lavazza is great in the AeroPress, or you can make an espresso or a mocha pot. Delightful. So yeah, I like a variety. Today, as you heard me drinking, and you'll hear me again, I think it's still, I don't know if you can hear that. Today, I make a daily morning cup of what I will call cappuccino, but not really. Any barista of any credible background would probably raise an eyebrow or two at that, but I'll call it a cappuccino. I have a heating whisk frother, so it's not a steamer. One day I will consider getting a milk steamer. I'll throw that on the buy me a coffee thing. I think it's like $100. It's just a standalone milk steamer. Like I said, I don't have a tabletop espresso machine. The manual, I think, works great because it's only me. If I was making 3 or 4 espressos every morning and then through the day, then having a real espresso machine might make a difference, might make sense. But if I'm just going to have me make an espresso now and then, manual is great. But it doesn't have not even a single boiler. So no milk steaming built in, no steamer wand to keep clean, etc. So eventually maybe I'll get a standalone steamer. So you just heat it up on a stove. It has a little milk wand and you're all good. For the moment, though, I use my heating whisk frother. I have 2. One, the nonstick surface inside started cracking, so there's some little craters. So I was like, that doesn't look good. So I got an Instapot milk frother. It works great. So I put heavy cream, which I'm sure once again, what? Blasphemy. Heavy cream. I have tried also normal milk, like whole milk. I have also tried, don't even do this, but like almond milk and stuff. Not as good, just not as good. So I appreciate that if you don't want or can't have lactose for whatever reason. But if you can, I really like heavy cream. I do have I think it's a Bodrum manual frother, and it has like a micro screen in it so you can make the little micro bubbles. And I have done that. It is a little bit messy, but I have it. It's not even worth doing with heavy cream, so got to use it with whole milk. Whole milk does not keep as well. I go through the heavy cream every day, but if I have the whole milk and I only use it every once in a while, before you know it, you're like, oh, there goes a half a gallon of milk I didn't drink for 2 weeks. So yeah, I usually go with the heavy cream in the whisk frother. I often, almost daily at this point, I will inject some Torani sugar-free salted caramel or English toffee or hazelnut. Once again, blasphemy. I have even thrown in some Carnation malted milk powder, which is a little bit messy, requires a little bit of extra cleanup. I mean, it doesn't leave the whisk frother, but the whisk does kick up the powder internally. And then it's hot, so then it's gets a little sticky. So a little bit more cleanup. But if you want to try something interesting, a little malted milk cappuccino, it's pretty good. And then I do the inverted AeroPress method. I also learned from James Hoffman. 35 grams of a dark roast coffee. This morning it was the Lavazza Grand Crema, I think is what I've got opened. So 35 grams in the grinder. Originally, it was a more coarse grind, and you'd have it steep for a minute. So you'd do the immersion part of the brew for 60 seconds after you did a little stir. I went with a finer grind, and I usually have it brew for about 30 seconds. And I enjoy the taste. And this is the thing about coffee in general, is if you have all the dials and switches at your disposal, and you can figure out, right? You can do some research, you can read, you can watch videos, or you can just try it. If you are willing to experiment, you can definitely dial in your coffee taste, right? The best coffee taste is the taste that you enjoy the most, and that's why you're making your own coffee. It should be the best coffee you can make. So I make my AeroPress 35 grams, reasonably on the Baratza. I think it's like 12 clicks or something like that. I'm not looking at the machine right now, of course, but not coarse like a French press, not fine like an espresso, somewhere in the middle. And by the way, you can get more accurate coffee measurements on grind size, but it's a little tricky. There's an Android app out there somewhere. You can use a camera to do a statistical assessment of your grind. What the world needs, though, is a standard way of qualifying coffee grind. Otherwise, you get a medium coarse, a coarse grind like a French. There's all these for as exact a science as coffee can be. The grind size for anyone not equipped with like the absolute finest in equipment, TDS and all total dissolved solids and all that. I have a scale. I have a scale and a gooseneck coffee pot with a heater, so I can heat to a specific temperature, boiling. So 35 grams coffee, ground, inverted AeroPress. So the plunger is on the bottom. You put the vessel onto the plunger so that the rubber plunger part is the bottom of the vessel, and then you pour the coffee in. I personally, this is a little hot tip, I personally put some dark chocolate nibs into the top, so that when you pour the boiling water, and when I say boiling, I let it boil, and then it comes off the boil about 2 degrees, 4 degrees, somewhere in there. Then I pour it over, so don't burn it. But yeah, that guy knows. The nibs will start to melt, so you'll get some of the chocolatey and some of the oils will flow through. Because the nibs are on the top, even though I do stir, they will tend to be at the top end of the vessel. Then when you put I have a steel screen, like I said, it's a microfine, so it's almost no fines get through, none that I'm aware of. So you put the screen and the end cap on. You press down, so you press out some of the air like a syringe, right? Then you flip it over, put it on your cup, let the 30 seconds or so, 30, 45, somewhere in there. I mean, because I'm putting the heavy cream in there, it doesn't matter too much. Like you don't taste the finer notes of a bitter or astringent coffee. But 30 or 45 seconds, give or take. I sometimes use the Death Wish dark roast, sometimes medium roast. Sometimes I use this really good Black Diamond Robusta. It's only Robusta beans, but they're always fresh. It's one of my favorites, even though it's a little expensive. Every once in a while. Anyway, so you do that. You press the coffee through. That's the percolation phase, although that's the lesser of the two phases. So the AeroPress in this mode is more immersion, some percolation. You press the coffee out, then you put the heavy cream in. So I say it's not a cappuccino. I don't do the spooning out of the foam and all this stuff. So very, very pedestrian. Probably more of a latte. I have a chart somewhere with different coffee with the cream and all that. But bottom line, it is delightful. I'm almost done. Like I said, I normally drink coffee before so that I'm not doing this. Heavy cream. When I was into keto, which I am trying to be again. I mean, I always do something like keto now. Once I kind of dialed it in for myself, I like the one meal a day and so on. So I will do the coffee with some MCT oil. I have some white cocoa butter, white cacao, I guess, just the butter. So sometimes I'll throw that in there, but mostly MCT oil, a little bit of potassium salt. I know that sounds crazy, but pretty good. And sometimes I will throw in some actual cacao powder. I say cacao because it's not the same as cocoa, etc., etc. A little bit of cacao. I have thrown the cacao into the frother. I do not recommend. No. So, or sometimes I'll tap a little bit on top of the small amount of foam. I should try the microfoam thing. I haven't tried that in a while. See if I can get some really good microfoam going. Anyway, bottom line, I have a very nice coffee in the morning with my MCT oil. Heavy cream is reasonably keto friendly. So it's essentially a keto-free / fat fast start to the day, and it's delightful. I think at some point I did the cost calculations. It's something like $1 to $1.50. So not bad, not bad. Not as much noise. The Wi-Fi is technically not free, but I can get a refill. I know the barista. So I have a few go-to beans. I've mentioned the Lavazza Grand Crema. Is that what I said earlier? Grand Crema. There's 3 different espresso beans from Lavazza. I definitely have an order. I'll put that on the Buy Me a Coffee thing. It's not hard and fast, although I think one of the 3, which I'm drinking today, is my favorite, but they're all pretty good. Lavazza makes several fine beans, or roasts several fine beans. I haven't done the mocha pot in a while. I should give that a try. Now, I did come across white coffee recently. It's extremely lightly roasted, which goes against what I've just described as my favorites, as dark roasted. However, it is probably worth a try. The lighter the roast, the more difficult the grinding, because the beans are harder. When you roast the bean, you kind of fracture the outer shell of the bean, the outer layer. So white roasted are the hardest, maybe the hardest of roasted coffee beans. So probably we'll get pre-ground, espresso ground white coffee to try out. I'll put it in the flare and we'll see how it goes. Excuse me. Yeah. Don't drink coffee during, especially with heavy cream in it. I like hand grinding coffee as well. I have a nice hand grinder, which I usually use for the lighter roasts. I use a pour over for the lighter roast. Fun fact, if you are interested in such things, the pour over method has among the highest caffeine extractions. So if you use a light roast, pour over, you are likely to get more caffeine extraction. You would think it would be you'd be doing that with espresso, but espresso, the water goes through very quickly, and even though you might be using Robusta beans in your espresso grind, it just doesn't have quite the extraction. Now, if you make a Turkish coffee in the traditional way, you're using a super fine Turkish ground coffee, which I have. You put that in a little immersion pot, and you let the coffee extract into that. You're going to get a pretty strong cup of coffee. But allegedly, pour over is where it's at. So yeah, I do the light roast, hand grind, pour over, straight coffee, no cream or anything. Pretty good. If I use the single origin beans from Atlas, month over month or months over months, you can definitely taste the differences from different places. I'm not so much into grassy coffee beans. So like I said, more chocolatey, more savory. So I'm not really into the fruity, more the nutty. But you learn that when you start trying. You start trying things, different ways of making them and so on. So that's the coffee story. Kind of went on at length there, but I cannot stress this enough. It is, if you enjoy coffee, even if you enjoy coffee for the effects that the caffeine has on you, which is, of course, to prevent you from feeling tired. Coffee does not contain energy. It blocks your tired feelings, so it gives you the illusion of wakefulness. But they're all manner of, keto-friendly drink, definitely. I put stevia if I need to sweeten, or I mentioned the Tirani syrups. Those are not quite as healthy as, I think they have sucralose maybe in them. Stevia, nice natural. I use white stevia in coffee, and then I use green stevia in other beverages. So definitely, if you are the least bit interested in drinking coffee frequently, whether you use it straight for the energy, maybe you drink it to lessen your appetite, maybe it's part of your digestion process, maybe you like the diuretic feel when you have to use the restroom and go pee every once in a while. So whatever you're doing, if you enjoy coffee, or if you want to enjoy coffee, it is worth learning how to make the coffee you're drinking better with making just a few adjustments. And it can be done, ultimately worthwhile. If you really get into it, and I'm not saying I don't drop $1,800 on a coffee grinder. I don't drop $2,000 on a double boiler, espresso machine, etc. More. You can spend as much money as you want. It is a much cheaper habit than than whiskeys or craft beers. You can spend all kinds of money on that stuff. But coffee, practical, and a little bit of a science experiment that you can conduct every day. So yeah, I'm a big fan. I drink it every day. And I will end repeating my Buy Me a Coffee pitch. I'll place some of the coffees that I drink. I guess I'll link on Amazon. I usually just have a monthly subscribe and save, get a decent price on the Lavazza, and even the Death Wish is better than the grocery store. Every once in a while, I'll buy some beans from a grocery store or if a coffee shop here in Vegas makes their own beans. My dream bean is the Nicaraguan tobacco coffee that is available from Cafe Free in Hungary. They're also located in Dubai and some other places. So one of these days, because they do not ship apparently to America, I'll have to travel out there and get some. I tried they had a coffee shop in Dublin once for a brief, and then they sold it off. So they no longer have a Dublin location, but the Cafe Free, Frei, I should put a link on there. I'll put a link in the show notes as well. Cafe Free, Nicaraguan tobacco coffee. I tasted it in their shop in Dublin, and fabulous, just wonderful. Definitely an unusual flavor. The process by which they make this is very interesting in Nicaragua. So yeah, if you can ever find that, check it out and send me some. In the meantime, coffee powers all the things I do. Much better to drink a few pints of coffee than a few pints of beer by most measures, especially if you want to get stuff done. So that's where I'll leave it today. buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo. I will again fill in Amazon links probably for the coffees that I get. I'll put a link to Cafe Free in the show notes. And on that note, I thank you for listening. I will try to do lateral thinking next week, or whenever you're listening to this, the next episode. So this has been episode 13. So look for episode 14, lateral thinking. Thank you as always. Thanks. Like, share, subscribe, share with your friends, share with everybody. And thank you. Take care.